What's up, everybody?
And welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 314. I am your host, Kendall Ray.
Wow, fancy today. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Josh.
And we are joined by our lovely production team, Janelle and Ian.
Hey. Hi, guys.
Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
As always, we love having you guys. Now, today we are getting into a case that we are going to have quite a bit of discussion about. We have been talking about it nonstop. We have so many different thoughts, theories. I don't even know what to think. This one is truly wild. It's baffling. We're going to kind of be talking a little bit about the famous staircase case.
Michael and Kathleen Peterson?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes. We have done quite a bit of coverage on that as well. I think we've done...
Yeah, we did a whole episode on that a long time ago.
Mm-hmm. And that one still bothers me to this day. And this one, we're talking about a staircase once again, and whether or not this was an accident or was it a homicide? Was there something nefarious? It's really, really frustrating. It's one that I feel like I lean 75% one way and 25% another way. I can't fully come to my own conclusion, which I can't imagine how hard it's been for her family not having these answers, because it's truly just bizarre. And this case comes out of Canada. We're going to be talking about Amanda Antoni. And yeah, what happened to her is just so confusing, so terribly sad, horrific.
Yeah, which there's not been a
scene.
Whole lot of coverage on this other than if you've seen the new volume of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yeah, they did one.
This is really the only coverage of it recently.
I'm very surprised this one hasn't gotten more traction. Details around her suspicious death that really make no sense. It's so frustrating. And, a lot of the theories are around this possibly having just been a freak accident, which is really hard for me to accept. Although other
freak
theories don't really
happen.
They do.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other details don't really make sense. So let's just go ahead and get into it here by telling you more about Amanda. So Amanda was born on June 5th, 1984, and was actually fostered by Linda and Leslie Hogg in the town of Carstairs. You guys have such interesting town names up in Canada. But this is north of Calgary. The Hoggs had two other sons, Alan and Daryl, and Amanda was actually only 2 months old when they brought her into their home. Alan said that Amanda was always really the baby of the family because when they fostered her, she was 13 years younger than he was. The Hogg family formally adopted Amanda 14 months after they initially fostered her because, quote, she had the most beautiful blue eyes and had stolen their hearts. Daryl and Alan said that they spent a lot of time being big brothers to her and were incredibly close with her from a very young age. She would fall asleep on Alan's chest while they watched the Flintstones, and they said that it was exciting to watch her personality grow. Amanda was a bit of a prankster at heart and loved to joke around with her family. She also definitely had a real soft spot for animals, and if it were up to her, she would have brought in strays by the dozen. Totally relate to that. I would do the same. A mutual friend introduced Amanda to Lee Antoni, and the two of them quickly fell in love. She moved in with Lee at age 20, and they bought a home in the Castle Ridge neighborhood of Calgary, which is 65.8 kilometers or just under 41 miles from her family in Carstairs. After dating and living together for a few years, the two of them married in July of 2009. Now, the Castle Ridge neighborhood is noted for having a much higher crime rate than other parts of Calgary. Neighbors noted how there were constant violent assaults, gunshots, and the Antonis often had trespassers in their backyard attempting to steal bottles and cans from their garbage. However, no one had tried to enter the house from the back door. But still, the two of them made a nice little home here. The house was 3 stories with an opening to the basement from the living and dining area. We'll have some pictures if you're watching the episode, but there was no door to the actual basement from the living and dining area. And there are 4 laminated wood stairs leading to a landing with a small shelf on the wall, which is important to note, before the carpeted stairs led to a concrete floored unfinished basement. Amanda was always, quote, creeped out by the basement and avoided it entirely except to do laundry.
I would love to know
according to Lee.
why that is. Maybe it's just like a lifelong fear of basements. You know, some people
I
are
get
creeped
it.
out by them.
I totally get it, especially with an unfinished basement. There's kind of like a creepy feeling. I was always kind of like creeped out by my basement growing up. I don't know, especially if I was home alone. I think that's pretty common.
I was going to say, so according to someone on Reddit, I didn't include it in the episode because who knows if
It's
this
Reddit.
is true. It's
Yeah.
Reddit. But he claimed to have lived in the house before the Antonis did.
Oh, really?
And he was like, he had his office set up in the basement, and he even wrote like, yeah, spending too much time down there, I'd start to get freaked out. So I do think it's just like, it's just creepy, like to be in an empty, no furnitured, concrete, cold place. It's horrible.
Yeah, I totally get that. I used to always like run up from our basement as a kid. Like, once I'd turn the lights off, I would just like book ass up the stairs.
Yeah, maybe I don't relate because I lived in a creepy basement as a kid for a while.
Oh, yeah, you did, yeah.
With like a creepy storage room. Like in my room, there was a door to an unfinished storage room, basically. That was like...
that would have freaked me out as a kid.
Yeah, and I had to get over that real quick because it was terrifying for a little while. I was more scared of like the room than the actual basement.
Yeah, I can see why.
You know, boogeyman's in there or something, but...
And like we mentioned, Amanda was a huge animal lover, and she got to have some pets in her new home with Lee. They had a black lab named Ruby and 2 cats named Gizmo and Meatball, which I love that because we also have a cat named Meatball, and I think that is an elite name.
Well, you hated it for a long time. You gave me a lot of crap for wanting to name her cat Meatball.
For like a few months, and then I was like, that's the best name for her. She is a meatball.
I don't even know where I came up with that. It was just kind of
It was because
random...
Jersey Shore was on at the time.
Ah, gotcha. You
You're
meatball?
hearing meatballs all the time. Anyway, the family noted how Amanda had really lit up around Lee, and they had always been in love. But that doesn't mean that they were without problems, of course, as every relationship does have issues most of the time. Lee had, quote, a wild side when they first met. We're not really sure exactly what is meant by that, but that's just according to the family. And he also really struggled to hold down a job. Amanda herself ran a cleaning service called Simply Spotless and was really the breadwinner of their home. And she would often complain about Lee, frustrated with his, inability to keep a job. And although Alan liked Lee and knew that Amanda loved him, he was always bothered by this tension and how it would always lead to fights between the two of them, which would really stress his sister out. So in 2010, Amanda's dad, Leslie, passed away, and the Hogg family grew even closer after that. Amanda often spent weekends driving to Carstairs to hang out with her brothers. However, Lee's family was also affected by tension. Lee's sister, whose name has not been publicly revealed, unfortunately had become addicted to hard drugs. And so Lee and Amanda ended up caring for her daughter and really feared for her safety as Lee's sister became more involved in crime. Eventually, they called CPS, and her daughter was removed from his sister's care, and she was furious about it. She would call them like 20 times a day asking, quote, "Where the fuck is my daughter?" And Lee's sister already disliked Amanda going into all of this, but once all of that happened, now she really hated her. And she would actually make threats against Amanda's life, and Amanda really feared for her safety. So then in 2014, Lee's father had passed away, and a year later in October of 2015, he and Amanda planned to drive to his mother's house in Saskatchewan to settle his estate.
So that leads us to Friday, October 23rd. Lee and Amanda planned to make the 6.5-hour drive to Makwa in Saskatchewan to help Lee's mother settle his father's estate. However, in the morning, Amanda suffered from a pretty serious migraine. She didn't really get them that often, but when she did, they were pretty severe. And Amanda would often be affected for days, which, if you've ever had a migraine before, I feel like I've had a few. They're really bad. And they definitely can just like make you want to go lay down and do absolutely nothing in the dark. They're really painful.
Debilitating, really.
Absolutely.
I've never had one. They sound horrible. Janelle gets them too.
Yeah, mine make me feel sick. Like
Really?
I get really nauseous. I usually puke. The light hurts. They just suck.
Hasn't your vision been affected by it
one
before
time I got
too?
an ocular migraine. That scared the crap out of me. I thought I was like having a stroke.
Ugh.
That only happened one time, gratefully, but that really freaked me out. I couldn't see.
Yeah, man, I really feel for people who
Yeah.
deal with migraines. It just sounds horrible.
Yeah, I don't want to complain because some people have like chronic migraines where they get them like once a week, multiple times a
Yeah, I
week.
can imagine that'd be horrible.
God, how can you do anything?
I know.
So awful.
So, like many of us, Amanda would get them from time to time, and she ended up looking up herbal remedies, smoking marijuana to help ease the pain, as well as taking over-the-counter painkillers in order to help. However, Amanda couldn't get rid of the migraine this time and told Lee to make the trip alone. Amanda's family noted that she and Lee had never spent a night apart since they had gotten married, and this would be the first time one had taken an extended trip without the other. Lee left Amanda at their home in Castle Ridge at around 11 a.m. that Friday and made it to his mother's home without incident. Have you ever felt uneasy leaving your home, wondering if everything's going to be all right while you're away? I know we have, or I was gone the other night.
Yeah.
You felt a little uneasy.
I did. I get a little anxious. Josh was out with the boys and I kept hearing weird sounds, but I'm able to not even leave my bed, pull up my app and see exactly what's going on in all parts of our house, check on the animals, thanks to Simply Safe.
That's the beauty of it, is that it does give you that peace of mind, knowing that you can see everything going on inside and outside of your home at any time, no matter where you are. Even when we're not home and we're running errands or something, if I want to pop into the backyard real quick and see what the dogs are up to, it's real easy. The app makes it seamless. And also the cameras are extremely high quality, some of the clearest cameras I've seen out there. And I've tried a lot of different security systems over the years. Some that have raked me over the coals so bad, I was very upset with how much they charged me.
For bad service and bad cameras, outdated technology. Yeah.
Yes.
Simply Safe just really takes it up a notch.
Yeah.
And they keep it simple, which I love.
One of my favorite things about Simply Safe is the fact that you can customize the system to your home, no matter what size it is. I mean, you could literally set this system up in your apartment if you wanted to, with some door sensors, a video camera for inside. It's that simple, and you can adjust the cost based on that, which I absolutely love. They have a quiz that will help you customize your system for your home. But they also have Fast Protect monitoring and Live Guard protection, which means that Simply Safe agents can act within 5 seconds of receiving your alarm and can even see and speak to intruders to stop them in their tracks, which is a truly unique feature of Simply Safe. So for example, if somebody breaks into your home, you're not there, and not only are they going to notify the authorities, but they're going to try to deter them from actually stealing anything by talking to them. And I hope
Leave
they say
now.
I hope they say some really,
The police are coming.
like, get the out right now.
Yeah.
Police are on their way, asshole. So Simply Safe is the best of the best. So much so is named Best Home Security Systems by US News and World Report for 5 years running. They also offer the best customer service, which you want good customer service for such an important service at your house. So protect your home with 50% off a new Simply Safe system plus a free indoor security camera when you sign up for Fast Protect monitoring, which is a great deal. Just visit simplysafe.com/milehigher. That's simplysafe.com/milehigher, because there's no safe like Simply Safe. Lee called Amanda almost immediately after he got to his mom's house, and from that point forward, the two constantly communicated through text messages. He asked her about the migraines, and she asked him about his mother. The next day, Saturday, October 24th, Lee called Amanda around 7:06 p.m. Lee said it sounded like Amanda was walking through the house while they were on the phone. During that call, she said her migraine had improved and Ruby barked in the background. Amanda told Ruby to quiet down, and then Lee heard Ruby yelp. And suddenly, Lee heard a crashing noise from Amanda's end of the call, and then there was just absolutely nothing. Silence. Lee hung up at 7:10 p.m. He then tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. And then he went and tried using his mom's landline, but it still went to voicemail. So Lee, your first thought is like, okay, something happened with the dog or something, no big deal. So he had assumed that maybe her phone had died and she was probably just resting, or maybe the migraine had returned and she just needed to get off the phone. So Lee texted her again at 10:44 a.m. the following morning, but got no reply. Once again, he didn't think anything of it. He just assumed that she was probably with Daryl or Alan, as they like to spend Sundays together.
I am a little bothered by this. And I know every relationship is different. I don't want to, get too speculative with it, but I think it's strange to have heard a dog bark and, he said he heard the phone like falling, crashing down, and then to just not hear from her after that. I'd understand like maybe waiting a little while, but if that were me personally, I'd be very concerned, especially knowing that she did have this migraine, wondering why the dog was barking. And he said it sounded like a concerning bark, kind of out of the usual. So if it were me, I feel like I would call a neighbor or someone in the family or possibly even the police to go and perform a welfare check on her.
Yeah, I think everybody's probably different, but I think even from like a guy's perspective, I think you're not thinking about the worst case scenario necessarily. And like, obviously, since we know everything that happens, it makes more sense for us to think that way. And maybe some of us do just inherently think that way. But I think to your point, the one thing that comes to mind for me is the fact that this was the first time that they were spending time apart. And as far as like being gone overnight apart from each other.
Yeah.
And maybe there would be a little bit more, caution, wondering about the other, concern, you know what I mean?
Especially
possibly,
to hear a loud crashing noise on the line and then it just...
But also I can see with, there's a lot of couples that be like, I don't want to come across needy or like, like I'm trying to be all up in your business. Like this is good for us to have a little bit of time apart. I'm not going to like be overly concerned about something that may be no big deal, right? Because you don't know.
Yeah, I can see that, especially in the beginning of a relationship. But when you're in as deep of a relationship as this and it is your first time apart, it just strikes me as odd that, with that much time going by that he'd be like, oh, it's probably fine, considering she is really suffering from this migraine. He hears the dog bark. He hears the crashing noise. It's strange to me. I could see how, it might mean absolutely nothing, but it just really stuck out to me. I just would personally send someone to check on her.
I kind of agree with Josh on this, just like, because as a dude, or at least in my perspective, I really don't assume the worst. Like when I was living with my ex, if I did go out of town, we'd be on the phone and there would be times where the line would just cut out or something. And, I would just be like, all right, talk to you later. And then,
but like, would she eventually call back later on or like text?
Not always. No.
Really?
No. And so like, I think that for me, I really do think this is their first time apart. And, even though, as Lee presented it in his side in the documentary, he was very much like, oh, we were in love, da da da. We don't know if there was like some underlying tension as well, as we know. So maybe I personally see it as like, he probably just didn't want to call back in case like he just didn't want to bug her. He didn't want to seem clingy or seeing this as like a test since it's their first time apart for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I can see that too. It's just, I don't know. It was a little strange to me.
I find it a little odd.
Do you? Maybe
do.
It's just like as
an anxiety.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I
Two
think
anxious
because,
girlies.
yeah.
I don't know. I find that a little odd. If I was on the phone with John and one of my dogs barked and then the phone hung up.
And you heard a loud crash too.
And I didn't hear from him for the rest of the day.
And he has a migraine.
I'd be pretty freaked out.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
For sure.
That'd be like anyone. Like if I was on the phone with you and that happened.
I'd be calling back and, if I'm not hearing anything, especially after a few hours go by, personally, I would send someone over there.
And like, obviously we don't, like you guys were alluding to, we don't know their full relationship and, the boundaries they had set or whatever. So it's hard to like really make a judgment call, but just me personally, I would have found that a little odd.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to point that out.
I think it's fair. I think we all probably have a different way of handling this situation. But, I know there's some people that have very independent relationships and, it's just kind of like, well, she'll get back to me when she wants to get back to me. It's probably no big deal. I mean, if you have a dog, you've heard your dog yelp before. You've heard all the barks that your dog has made. And that dogs overreact to things. You know what I mean? Like
but there's also a crash and then the phone hangs up. To me, I'd be like, what happened there?
So this is a black lab, and black labs are fairly big dogs. They have big tails. Like they could have just knocked something off of the counter. They could have, you know what I mean? Like it could have.
Or
that's what I'm saying. But like
else.
Your immediate reaction, if you've never had something crazy or terrible happen to you before, your mind is not going to go to necessarily the worst case scenario.
Unless you have anxiety.
Right.
It absolutely does.
Right. Exactly. For most of us, we're probably just going to, our brain is going to be like, oh, the dog probably knocked something over. She dropped her phone, or, you're going to think a more logical, rational explanation based on prior experience versus like, oh, let my brain go to the worst case scenario here, and then I'm going to fixate on that and react accordingly. Does that make sense? And I think obviously everybody's different and is going to react differently.
I'm curious to hear the audience perspective on that. I'm sure it'll vary depending on the person, but I don't know.
Totally.
This was really odd to me.
So Lee was busy with his mother for the rest of the day, but decided to head home early the following Monday, October 26, to surprise Amanda. Lee left his mom's house at 8:30 a.m., only stopping once for gas. He returned home to Castle Ridge in the early afternoon, and when he entered, Ruby greeted him at the door, but he didn't hear anything from Amanda. He noticed Ruby had an accident on the top stair near the basement, so he let her out through the back door. Now, it's very important to note that when he got back to the house, Lee cannot remember if the back door was locked or not, which is, man, if we had that piece of information, it might be, it'd be critical to everything that's about to unfold.
But I could very easily see how you wouldn't remember whether or not it was locked.
Yeah, who remembers like unlocking or walking in a door?
And you have no idea what you're walking in on, so
exactly.
I mean, maybe.
Lee also noticed that a dining room chair had been tipped over and Amanda's phone was broken on the floor beside it. They were both about 10 feet from the opening of the basement. Assuming Amanda was resting upstairs, Lee went to their bedroom to check on her. When he reached the bedroom, he only saw Gizmo and Meatball inside. And the only place that he hadn't checked yet in the house was the basement, which he assumed Amanda wouldn't go there because she hated the basement so much. So why would she just be hanging out down there? As Lee walked down the stairs, he noticed 2 full laundry bins sitting on the landing in the middle of the staircase. And while he didn't notice this, a piggy bank that stayed on the little shelf within the stairwell had its face broken off and a piece of ceramic was stuck in the carpet on the stairs that reached down to the basement. When Lee got to the bottom of the staircase, he saw what had happened. Amanda was lying in a pool of blood that covered almost the entirety of the basement floor. Blood was splattered on the walls, streaked across the ground, and covered her face and clothes. Her slippers were near the foot of the staircase while her body lay on the opposite side, and her pants had been pulled down past her buttocks, and Lee could see her underwear. Lee immediately turned around, fumbled his way back up the stairs, and called 911. When the operator asked him to check to see if she was alive, he didn't want to go back down. He said, quote, "That was the hardest thing, and I didn't know if I could do it." Then Lee touched her, and she felt cold. Responding officer Trent Peterson arrived within minutes and met Lee at the front door, Lee was sitting down, I believe on the front porch at that point in time. And he said that she was still in the basement and Ruby was still barking in the backyard.
So the first thing that investigators notice when they walk into the scene is the amount of blood. It is honestly unbelievable. It is very gory, very, very scary to see. Warning, we're going to put some of them in here because it is important to understanding the case. But blood stain analyst Jody Arns said that it was one of the worst scenes of her career and that she had never seen one with so many different kinds of patterns and stains of blood. There were 2 large pools of blood near where Amanda's body was found, and the stain outlined the position that she was lying in. And without an autopsy completed yet, it appeared that the mortal wound came from a fracture just above her eye to her hairline. And when she was found, Amanda's body was in full rigor mortis, indicating that she had been deceased at least since the previous day, leading to the discovery of her body.
I also just want to note that she was the position her body was discovered in was kind of laying on her side.
Mm-hmm.
And from the photos, you can kind of see, like, as we mentioned, you can see the outline and kind of where it would have been positioned within all of the blood. So,
also, pieces of that broken piggy bank were actually found embedded into her skull potentially indicating that it could have been used as a bludgeoning tool. However, the piggy bank was still left on the shelf to the landing of the basement, and it had dust settled on top, which shows that it had not been moved for a while. There were no fingerprints on the piggy bank, just a small divot actually in the wall behind it that potentially showed that it was pushed back into the wall rather than picked up. Now, the piggy bank element is so strange in this whole case. I cannot wrap my mind around it. We will talk about it more. But aside from the 2 large pools of blood where Amanda was found, blood was all over the concrete floored basement. And there was blood spatter on the walls, which initially made investigators believe it was backsplash from a weapon. But Jody realized it was more likely it came from Amanda actually shaking her hair, trying to get blood out of her eyes, which is just a horrific thing to think about. And there were also 12 barefoot impressions that were found in the blood, which actually makes sense because Amanda's slippers were found near the stairs in the basement. Now, these impressions were mainly where Amanda was found, but also near the mirrors along the right wall and the base of the stairs. Now, Amanda could have been staring into the mirrors for many reasons, either to potentially inspect her wounds, or maybe she was confused due to her injury, which we will also get more into. It's possible that she thought it was another entryway, like didn't realize that she was looking into a mirror. However, the barefoot marks at the base of the stairs were still very puzzling, as no blood was found on the staircase itself. So why would she stand at the bottom of the stairs and not attempt to climb back up them to, call 911 or get to safety? That's a big question mark here as well. So aside from the barefoot impressions that were left in the blood, there were actually no impressions of someone wearing footwear, and there were also no paw prints from the animals in the blood either, which it's important to note that it's possible that the animals went downstairs after the blood had already dried and, walked around on top of it at that point, and therefore wouldn't have actually left any paw prints. But also, and this is an interesting topic to discuss here as well, it's possible that they just didn't go downstairs out of fear. And this is something I didn't know. The smell of blood can actually make domesticated animals very nervous, which totally makes sense. So it's possible that they wouldn't have checked on their owner, even if they needed help, just out of fear. And I wanted to know a little bit more about this. I was looking on Reddit, and there were people telling stories about it was one woman I read specifically that had a similar instance where she had fallen down the stairs and her husband wasn't home, and she had really serious injuries from it, like broke both of her collarbones, and there's tons of blood. And she was like, I was very surprised that my dog, who follows me around all the time, did not come downstairs. And luckily her husband came home and she was okay, because it could have been a very bad situation. But yeah, it's possible that you would think your animals would come and try to help you, but it's like a fear thing, which I think every pet is also different, depending on their breed or their personality. But it's quite possible they were just too afraid to go downstairs.
Well, I think you also have to remember, too, there's a reason they have to do so much extensive training for service animals.
Right.
I think, and, specifically people who have service animals who have epilepsy and things like that, they have to train, there's specific training that they do for those types of service animals so that they know how to alert and,
yeah,
you know what I mean? So I think everybody likes to think that your animal would come over to you, but not necessarily.
Mm-mm.
And I think the other thought too is, are dogs attracted to blood? Would they go down and, dogs lick blood off of, your wounds?
Yeah, that's kind of what I would have
thought.
But
maybe not in this kind of scenario. I tried to look into that as well, and I didn't see anything that would indicate that a dog would then go down and lick up the blood or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I know there's it's a smell thing for them.
Mm-hmm.
So like when you cut yourself, they can like smell the bacteria and like things like that from a wound. And then dogs are attracted to menstrual blood because of the pheromones.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Which is interesting because the dogs always go for women's underwear.
They do.
They do.
Which And it's the I believe it's the pheromones that they smell, and that's why they're attracted to it.
Yeah, Sadie loves to destroy my underwear.
So it's not necessarily the blood, but rather the pheromones, which I didn't know that before.
That's interesting. I had no idea. But there were also swipe marks in the blood that showed potentially someone may have wiped away other footprints before leaving the scene. And since the basement was so gruesome, at this point, investigators just assumed that this had to be a homicide, considering, just how horrific this scene was. And maybe that the animals could have been just kept upstairs by the assailant. And after a proper analysis of Amanda's body, it was observed that her orbital bone had been fractured and her body also had severe bruising, though nothing was indicative of defense wounds in particular. Investigators looking for anything to prove that someone was down there with her noticed blood drops amongst the other stains. They believe that these drops could have come from the assailant if Amanda had injured them during the assault, but DNA samples were taken from those drops and other stains throughout the basement and sent in for DNA testing. And while police waited for the autopsy and lab reports, they continued their investigation. Naturally, of course, Lee was the first suspect. Even Daryl had pointed to him early on in the investigation, citing issues that he had been having with Amanda regarding financial stability. On top of that, there were no signs of forced entry, meaning that someone would have had to have entered the home with a key or maybe through an unlocked door if that door was really unlocked.
Which I think is one of the big reasons why they went to look at Lee as well first, which obviously they always look at the significant other, the husband, the wife, whatever it may be.
Statistically, oftentimes that's the case.
Right. But I think the door is the big question because there's no forced entry. So either it was just unlocked or somebody had a key. And who had a key? Lee.
Yeah.
Police went and visited convenience stores that Lee had stopped at along the road to Saskatchewan, and they determined that he was not in the home at the time of the murder. While they considered a possible murder for hire, how would that be possible since Lee was, broke and relied on Amanda for financial stability? How would he be able to pay somebody to do something like that? He also had nothing to gain as Amanda didn't have a life insurance policy or estate, and it didn't take very long for police to rule Lee out as a suspect.
I do want to point out, and this is very just a random tangent, but he was inheriting some money after his father passed away, and people have brought up the idea that maybe he didn't want to share that money with Amanda. Again, that's like totally speculative, but I did want to just bring it up because many people have thought about that.
Which I would assume police probably knew that as well. And there would have to be evidence to support that, right?
Yeah.
So the police then considered the possibility that Amanda had been involved in an extramarital affair that had gone wrong. And for one, again, remember her pants were pulled down past her buttocks. And Lee noted that she was wearing fancier underwear than usual. However, after police went through her phone records and pings, they also determined that she was not intimately involved with anyone except for Lee. Yeah, the underwear thing was kind of weird because a lot of maybe you guys can speak more on women's underwear, but
I don't know. To me, I guess it's he would know best about if it looked like fancier underwear. It didn't look like anything crazy to me. If I remember, it was kind of like multicolored and silky and had palm trees on it or something. And normally she just wore like everyday pairs. But there have been plenty of times it's just like what's available to me and I just grab it and put it on, even if it's a fancier pair.
Especially if there was laundry baskets or
exactly.
a large laundry basket laying there. Like who knows, maybe they had just finished or they were about to do laundry. Do we know if the laundry was clean or not?
We do not, unfortunately.
So who knows? I mean, it could have been, all of the dirty ones that she typically wears were in there. Maybe they were just cleaned. I don't really think that is as hot of a point as people make it seem to be.
Well, I think it literally only comes up to kind of like add credence to this extramarital affair theory.
Yeah. And I see it with having no answers and this being so bizarre how you would try to come up with anything.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really turned out to not be anything.
So police also considered maybe it was a stalker or a transient. And as previously noted, Lee and Amanda had been dealing with people in their backyard. And I think this was just kind of a thing everybody in the neighborhood dealt with from time to time. And perhaps, somebody was going through the backyard, kind of was watching through the windows and noticed that Amanda was home alone and just got bold and then checked the back door. It happened to be unlocked. Or it's possible maybe someone was following Amanda for, quite some time and then was actually really stalking her and noticed that Lee was leaving and took an opportunity to attack.
Yeah.
So there is more of a possibility with this theory. Police determined that Amanda's time of death had to have been around 7:30 p.m. on October 24th, just minutes after that phone call with Lee had been cut short. Around that time, a neighbor said they heard Ruby barking, and they said, this was their quote, a get out of here bark before they heard a yell between 6:30 and 7 p.m. Then another neighbor thought they saw someone running through their front yard just minutes later. And unfortunately, police could never identify who this person could have been and still have no idea if the back door was locked before Lee's arrival on Monday. So I guess during this time period, maybe everybody didn't have Ring doorbells, but it feels like, at least in today's day and age, everybody's got some type of video doorbell. Mm-hmm. And maybe very even common. If you had that, you wouldn't be able to see somebody running through your yard, or maybe they were like hooded or something, and there's just no way to discern the identity of that person. But
I do think it's really interesting that the neighbors really made note in their interviews about how the dog bark was so unusual. They would hear the dog barking quite a bit, but this was a very specific, alarming type of bark.
Yeah, you can't discount that. But then Lee pointed suspicion at his sister for suggesting it to Daryl and Alan. She had threatened Amanda's life before, and since she knew that Lee was going to be out of town with her mother 6 hours away, maybe she took this as an opportunity to get back at her. But this also led nowhere. Police actually went and questioned Lee's sister and found no evidence that she was in her house that day. And of course, we don't really have a lot of information, or really any information at all, about what exonerated her from the case. I assume possibly an alibi or something they were able to confirm.
Yeah.
But believing this to be homicide, police and Amanda's family pleaded with the public to offer information about her death, anything that people saw, heard, and we have the neighbors, and that's really where it ends, because when they did this, 0 tips came in, which is pretty wild.
Yeah.
Even in cases where there's virtually no evidence at all.
Right.
There's usually at least a few tips, and in this circumstance there was 0.
Or like even just people calling in a prank tip, I feel like that, again, this wasn't that well covered, but it was covered in local news when it happened.
Yeah.
And so you'd think like, some asshole would call in with some joke tip, but just the fact that there was nothing is really, really crazy to me.
Yeah. Or even people that just think they may have heard something, right. Normally there's tips that don't really lead anywhere, but really 0 coming in. That's just absurd.
It's interesting to me that other than like the couple neighbors that saw the person supposedly running through the yards, nobody else on the entire block was like, oh yeah, I saw the same guy, or there was a car that this guy then went and jumped into. You know what I mean? Where'd this guy run and go? And that's where I'm like, was there actually a guy running through the front yard? And I don't know that there is, because I feel like there would have been more. Like, if you think about it, if there had been an attacker, there would have likely been some other tips around that. Because where'd that person go? Where'd they run to? They just run to the and poof, disappear. They would have ran somewhere. Somebody would have been like, there was a, hooded person running across my street, or they saw a vehicle or something. I just find that very strange that there's absolutely nothing, because I don't know that there was anybody running through the yards.
Well, no one knows, but it doesn't mean it's not possible.
No, nothing's impossible, but I do find it a little weird. For many of us, it's been pretty hot outside. And, if you have pets, especially cats, you know what kind of bombs they can drop in that litter box. Or if you're like our cats, occasionally on the rug in the dining room.
Love that.
The smell just emanates throughout the entire house. I can smell it from like upstairs, downstairs, wherever I am. I know Well, one of my cats.
It's crazy. It's much
pooped.
worse than dog poop, I feel.
Getting rid of those smells or, making them far less potent is super important to us. And that's where Pretty Litter comes in clutch. Its non-clumping formula traps odor and moisture. It's ultra absorbent, it's lightweight, low dust, and 1 6-pound bag works for up to a month. For us, we need a little more than that because we got those. So, we go through quite a bit of Pretty Litter, but it is so much better than the clay litter. I've got asthma and, for years we were using clay litter and I'd be like sneezing, nose running. It's all in my eyes.
But really the best part of Pretty Litter is the peace of mind it gives you because it actually changes color to indicate signs of potential illness in our cats. And now that all of our cats are over the age of 10, they're all seniors technically. It's more important than ever that we are on top of their health. And so it alerts us to things like urinary tract infections, kidney issues, and more. And if that wasn't enough, Pretty Litter ships directly to our door. We never run out. We don't have to lug the big kitty litter bags or boxes, tubs, whatever, into our houses. It's just so much more convenient. Pretty Litter is amazing, you guys. You have to try it. Go to prettylitter.com/milehigher to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. That's prettylitter.com/milehigher to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/milehigher. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details.
On December 7th, 2015, the results of Amanda's autopsy and DNA tests of the blood at the scene were revealed. And it stated that she had died due to blood loss following blunt force trauma. According to the toxicology report, she had cannabis in her system consistent with her migraine treatment, but it's unknown how much she ingested. And that was a point they brought up as well, is that it's very difficult to figure out, what was the dose that they had taken or how much THC was in their system. Also interesting to note, there was no trauma to her brain. Her elbows and knees were bruised, but the only broken bone was her right orbital bone. Mm-hmm. An additional test found that she was not the victim of sexual assault, which I think is very, very important. And the blood swabs, of the other blood at the scene that they thought was other blood, every single one tested positive for Amanda's DNA and nobody else's. And at this point, every piece of evidence pointed to Amanda being the only one in the basement at the time of her death. And they sent the whole crime lab out there, pretty much. All the forensics out there. They did dusting for fingerprints. I mean, they really, I feel, did a thorough job.
From what we know, yeah.
Forensically.
It does seem that way.
And they found no fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. And again, there's no tips coming in. So really, the homicide theory is just kind of running out of ways to go because there's just nothing else to point to this being homicide based on evidence collected. So they approached behavioral scientists who suggested that Amanda's death may have been a freak accident. But a biomechanics engineer reviewed the evidence and found that while it would be rare for someone of her age, which again, Amanda was only 31 years old, her injuries were consistent with someone who had suffered a serious stair fall. Which again kind of reminds us of the other case. Very similar situation played out with the Michael and Kathleen Peterson case. Mm-hmm. The biomechanics engineer was able to map out a way that Amanda, while on the phone with Lee, could have tripped over Ruby while she was barking, fallen down the opening to the basement, hit her head on the piggy bank, knocking it into the wall, which ended up leaving the divot. Then she could have continued to fall down the stairs until she cracked her orbital bone on the concrete floor. And while forehead bleeds cause more blood loss due to increased blood vessels surrounding the skull and brain, they still clot like a regular wound if given proper attention. But if Amanda had taken painkillers like Tylenol and ibuprofen, in addition to cannabis, her blood may have been thinned to the extent that it would not have clotted. And if the initial impact had knocked her out, there would be no way for her to care for the wound, and she just continued to bleed.
So it's possible that after Amanda lost 15 to 20% of the blood in her body, she would have gone into hypovolemic shock, which hypovolemic shock is a state that the body enters once the victim has lost more blood than your organs need to function. At this point, she could have become disoriented, overheated. It's sort of similar to hypothermia in a lot of ways.
You experience many of the same symptoms as hypothermia. It's basically a similar state.
Yeah, like with hypothermia, oftentimes people will strip their clothes off, and that happens with hypovolemic shock as well. So it could explain why her pants were down. Also, the shock itself ended up hemorrhaging even more blood. This would explain why she stood at the front of the stairs so long. It's possible she was disoriented to the point where she didn't either know how to get up them or realize that she could get up them, or it seemed daunting. It's hard to understand what would be happening in your mind when you're in this type of shock. Perhaps she took off her slippers near the stairs, believing that she would have better traction, and then looked at the stairs and figured out or realized maybe it was too daunting. On top of that, those in hypovolemic shock often lay on the ground and thrash their limbs around, like almost making kind of snow angels, which could explain those blood swipes on the concrete floor. It could also explain why Ruby didn't go downstairs to check on her. If she had tripped over Ruby, the dog may have been scared that she would have been in trouble or punished. Although, I don't know, I mean, maybe at first, but would she have gone down the stairs eventually?
Like again, 2 days later? Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm pretty sure she would have forgot about her tripping over her. But yeah, all the other reasons we mentioned for why they potentially wouldn't have gone down the stairs. However, the accident theory still has a lot of unanswered questions. And all the members of the family believe that someone had to have been involved. And Jody Arns, the bloodstain analyst, said that there was, quote, no way that this was an accident. For one, we have to look at the phone's location and tipped over chair back upstairs in the kitchen. Amanda's fall had taken place while she was on the phone with Lee, as we mentioned. And why would her broken phone and tipped over chair be in the dining room, 10 feet away from the opening of the basement? This is just the part that I think we are all struggling with the most here. Her phone was like 10 feet away from her, or 10 feet away from the top of the stairs. And it's just hard to imagine if she had fallen, would she have thrown it that far?
10 feet's not that far, though.
I don't know. It seems far to me.
Well, I can save my thoughts for later, but I think for one, it's impossible for us to understand the distance that the distance between the stairs and the phone and the chair without actually being in the house. Because I think when you look at the house and just by looking at the exterior of the house and kind of estimating square footage of the home, this is a very, very small home. Mm-hmm. And I think if we all walked into the home and stood in that area, I think it'd feel a lot more reasonable to understand how this could have happened. Because I think the sheer square footage of this home is small to the point that it could absolutely be possible for the phone to be where it's at, close to the stairwell, and it all makes sense. Like, I think it's easy because it's easy to think, well, that's really weird that it's over here and the stairs are there. But I think it's because we're lacking the perspective of how big the house is. And I think if we all stood in there together right now, it'd be like, oh, it's very plausible that the phone could be where it's at. And she could be going down the stairs and could have tripped over the dog.
Yeah.
One thing I want to bring up that I'm shocked that people don't bring up more about this, and I'm shocked they didn't even mention in the Unsolved Mysteries episode, is the fact that if you look at the stairwell, can you pull up the picture of the stairwell? Let's look at this, because I think this is like, I just am like, don't understand how people don't notice this. There is no railing.
I know.
Yeah.
On that corner, which is definitely not up to code.
No.
That would be a violation, because obviously that's a major risk factor there.
Yep.
The phone and the chair are just on the outside of that, like 10 feet from this area right here. Mm-hmm. And the dog's running through. There's a stairwell, and then it looks like a hallway going to another part of the house. So to me, it seems very plausible that somebody could have tripped on the dog, perhaps stepped on the dog's paw, which would have made the dog yelp. And then you could very easily fall. Mm-hmm. There's no railing there. Right. Because if there was a railing there, then you're not going to fall off that ledge there, right? You're going to go down the opening and likely just fall into the landing. Mm-hmm. But because there's no railing there, you could easily fall off the ledge, and what's right at the base of this landing, right? Or of this edge?
The piggy bank.
The piggy bank.
Yeah, and that explains the piggy bank a little bit more. It's still very confusing, but
because the other thing, the other thing too, had a railing been there, she falls down those 3 steps as opposed to falling off this ledge here, which is at the top of a bunch of steps. I don't know exactly how many, maybe 8 to 10 steps. That's how she ends up at the bottom of the stairwell. Because chances are, if there was a railing and she had fallen down those 3 steps, she wouldn't have hit the piggy bank, and most likely her fall would have stopped at the landing. Maybe if the force was enough that she'd hit the landing and then continue falling down, but she would have never hit the piggy bank. Because you can see there's nothing for her to hit her head on in that immediate 3-stair drop into the landing.
Right.
But I'm like, how come nobody's talking about the ledge and the fact there's no railing there?
Yeah,
I
is
agree.
Strange.
And they made an argument of like, oh, well, if she fell, why isn't the laundry disturbed? And I'm like, well, if she
didn't fall there.
Yeah, if she fell right where my cursor is, she's not going to hit that. She's just going to go right into the stairs.
And into that shelf, into the piggy bank.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is, I'm struggling so much with the piggy bank too, because I don't, and maybe I just don't understand, but I don't get how you would hit it with your head with enough force to obviously cause those injuries, but also to break off just a piece of it, but then just push the rest back into the wall. It just, in my mind, the piggy bank would have fallen down the stairs with her. But no,
you got to look. And that's why I'm so glad they had a biomechanics engineer look at this, because he's going to have the knowledge in physics to understand the science behind how this happens. But because my guess, and we don't have the report. I'd love to see the report and hear the full take on how he thinks this happened. But if I'm guessing, you go off the ledge there, because to me, the ledge is the only thing that makes sense here. Is either she fell off the ledge accidentally, or somebody pushed her off the ledge, which I think is a possibility. And the piggy bank, I mean, we're talking about a ceramic piggy bank. Ceramics are heavy. They're thicker. It's not glass, so it's not going to shatter in the same way that glass shatters, right? Yeah. Ceramic always breaks into large chunks. And you have to think, too, the actual shape of the piggy bank. And I'm sure if you looked at the science behind the structure itself, the piggy bank's going to have weak points at the front of it because it's coming off the edge of it. And so for all we know, it could have been, hit the vulnerable points of this ceramic piggy bank and broke off the chunk off the front of it when her head hit it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess.
And the force of her coming off of the ledge into the wall there, into that shelf area, hitting it could have popped off the front of it, and then the force of her falling into it would have then shoved it backwards. Is it kind of crazy that it didn't fall? Yeah, it's pretty weird. But I don't think it's impossible that it ended up the way. And obviously, it made a divot. So had there been no divot there, I'd be much more suspicious. I'd be like, maybe somebody put it back up there.
But I mean, and the dust.
Yeah.
It hadn't been moved.
Right. If it had taken a tumble, most likely it would have tumbled all the way to the bottom, cracked completely out on the concrete floor. There would have been more evidence found of it being moved because the dust had been disturbed, even if somebody was gloved up and using it as the weapon. So to me, I'm like, as crazy as it seems, the evidence that we're seeing from the photographs tells us that she fell into it. The piggy bank broke off the front of it. It's the most vulnerable point of the piggy bank. And it got pushed back and it was pushed back with enough force to create a divot. I think that's significant as well. So that also tells us the force at which she was falling off that ledge.
It maybe tells us.
Well, it's telling us that it's enough force to then push the piggy bank into the wall to create a divot.
But she also could have been pushed with enough force.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that it's I'm just saying the force at which she fell off.
Yeah.
If you're talking about inertia and all these, talk about the physics of this, I think it makes sense.
So this was 2015. So what iPhone, which I don't know, she could have had an older one too. Yeah. And they don't have that, what is it,
They were
Gorilla Glass?
notoriously bad for breaking screens, so much so that they finally, and even still, their screens suck and they constantly break with the Corning glass that they use now. So it would be very easy to drop a phone, one of the older generation's iPhones, onto a tiled floor and have it completely cracked to pieces.
To the point where it's not even able to receive calls?
Well, it could just be dead. Her battery could have been drained.
I mean, he called back right away.
Well, it went to voicemail.
That's just so confusing.
Well, it's going to voicemail most likely because it's off.
I wish so bad we had a picture of the phone because, again, we don't know what kind of phone she had, but I just looked. It was iPhone 6 that was out. So if she had that, the back of those was that metal one. So it was way less likely to crack. Obviously, the front screen is still glass, but
she may not have had the newer one.
Yeah, she could have very easily not have had that.
4, 3, something else, yeah.
I will say, just on both of those, like, with the phone, I believe, even if where it ended up might not have also been the original location it was dropped. I still have a hard time seeing it like break to the point of not working. Certainly is possible, but say she dropped it just at that little ledge there, and then in the 2 other days, Ruby's freaking out. Ruby could have knocked the phone closer and then also knocked over the chair.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that is necessarily part of the initial fall. I will say with the piggy bank, I completely see how it could be pushed into the wall instead of falling down, even though, again, in my head, I see it falling with her.
Right.
I would notice, though, that in the documentary, when they pull out the piggy bank in like the current day from the evidence locker, it is in pieces.
Yeah.
It broke at some point in transit. So, I think still that's what's interesting to me is that with that initial impact that happened with Amanda crashing into it, just the front came off, but then throughout the years with just police handling, it actually cracked to the point of being fully broken.
Yeah.
Which you don't know how.
We don't know.
They could have literally dropped it on the floor for all we know.
Right.
Or it was just like very fragile after having an impact like that.
Well, yeah. Well, the structural integrity is compromised when a whole piece is broken off of it. Because it's kind of like, it's hollow on the inside. So when it's all together, it's more compact. You know what I mean? It's structurally sound. And then when you break a piece off of it, it's not structurally sound anymore. Like if you think, I'm sure there's somebody out there listening who's like works with ceramics that might provide more insight on this, but ceramics is heavy. Like we have ceramic mugs in the kitchen. Like it's like that would, and you take, when we've broken ceramic mugs before and they break off in big sharp chunks, you know? So
I still
very sharp too.
The thing with the piggy bank that's still getting me though, still gets me is that if she's falling from the ledge almost on top of it, like she's falling down onto the face of it, if it's the accident idea, like she tripped and fell over the ledge on top of it, I still, again, I'm not a biomechanical engineer, so
none of us are.
So to me, in my head, it makes sense that it would fall with her, like it would follow her, unless she was pushed directly from the ledge in more of a forward motion and then hit it. And knocked it
right,
out.
which is totally possible.
That's again like the accident versus homicide or push theory. Like right now, push seems very likely, to me at least.
Yeah.
But how would
still have a lot more to go over, though.
If she was pushed, how, like, was this person intending to murder her? Was this person intending to assault her? Like what? Like pushing them? Like if you're gonna break in, you're gonna push somebody down the stairs?
I know, that's the thing.
That's what's weird to me is like that was the intention, like come in, or maybe they had a confrontation, maybe it was never. But it's like when you play out every scenario, like which one really adds up, and I don't know.
It certainly doesn't, because there's no, if someone just walked into the house, especially if it's a transient looking to steal something, nothing was stolen. So what's the point of just pushing her down the stairs and leaving? I mean, maybe they pushed her down the stairs, realized how fucked up it ended up being, not intending to kill her, and then left. But then you would have assumed, like, okay, they would have left some sort of DNA, like this person's just running in, pushing her, and then leaving. Like, they're not going to stick around to clean up fingerprints if they're not going to take anything. So.
No, and they wouldn't have been prepared for that anyway, which we will get more into that as well.
Yeah, and she has a dog inside, and like they're going to like keep the dog away from going back outside with them, and there would have been a lot more barking that would have been heard. You know what I mean? If the dog, you know what I mean? Like if an intruder's breaking in, a dog is most likely going to bark consistently and go crazy, or an intruder is going to be deterred because of the dog.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have dogs for that very reason, because they know that most intruders are going to be like, yeah, hell no, it's going to bring way too much attention to myself. And especially in this type of neighborhood, the houses are all right next to each other. They're very small homes, so it'd be pretty tough. And again, this isn't like the middle of the night. This isn't like in the early morning hours where everybody's sleeping. And it's really not like the ideal time for an intruder to strike. You know what I mean? And that's what gets me too, is like the timing of everything. The dog to me would probably be barking. Or, I mean, some dogs even attack, you know what I mean? Like, depending on the breed, I don't think a Labrador is going to attack somebody, but they would bark probably. But, you know, and I feel like there would be some more evidence, because if there was more of a struggle, I feel like we would have seen something other than just a phone and a chair. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a small house. There would have been other things bumped into.
And she had no defense wounds.
Right.
Yeah, no.
And Lee himself even said that if somebody were to attack her, Amanda knew how to hold her own. She would have she would have absolutely fought with this person if she was attacked. And there's just none of that.
Maybe she didn't have the chance to, though. You know, happened very quickly, and she was pushed and then had such a bad injury that I don't know. It's so strange. Let's talk about what Lee and Jody believe. They do believe that Ruby, the dog, would have checked on her before the blood dried. Jody says that she has a black lab too, and noted that he would follow her wherever she went in the house. But you know, again, same argument. Every dog is different.
Well, maybe the dog did go down and check on her, but just never stepped foot on the concrete floor. I mean, dogs are pretty smart about, like, some dogs won't even step on
to look. Yeah.
On water. Like if the floor is wet, there's dogs that are just going to avoid that altogether. So maybe the dog goes down there and is on the stairs because she's just at the foot of the stairs down there and checks on her, but doesn't actually like walk on the wet blood, because the dogs just don't do that. Not always, but I feel like a lot of dogs wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Also, going back to the idea that she wouldn't have gone up the stairs because she was disoriented from hypovolemic shock. Daryl and Alan, her brothers, both believe that she would have climbed those stairs anyway. Even though she was bleeding profusely, they think that it would have taken several hours for her to have bled to death. And they believe that she would have tried to come up the stairs hell or high water. Obviously, you think about, she could have been unconscious for a lot of that and not able to make those initial decisions when it first happened. And she hadn't lost that much blood immediately, but maybe by the time she kind of like picked herself up, maybe she had like tried to lay there for a little bit and like calm down, or she felt dizzy from the entire thing. You also have to consider she had a migraine, that maybe she would have gone up the stairs if she wasn't, in so much pain or disoriented or unconscious. Like, we just don't know. I see what they mean though. And I think if it were my family member, I would think, of course, they would have tried to come upstairs and get help. I mean, we all think that. And that's the biggest question here, is why she didn't. But when you think about how much hypovolemic shock actually has an effect on you and disorients you, to me, it makes sense that she wouldn't have tried.
Yeah. I mean, people pass out from blood all the time. I've passed out from a blood draw. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, this is
a very different situation, but I think I totally understand where they're coming from. And I think we would all feel the same way. We would all think, no matter what, we would want to, we would do everything in our power. And I think she probably did. But I think when you're dealing with that much blood loss and
by the time she came to,
right,
possibly,
and you could have passed out for who knows how long at the bottom of the stairs, you wake back up and you're still bleeding, and you're like getting up, trying to gather your bearings. You're looking around, there's blood all around you. I mean, that's a very difficult situation to get out of, no matter who you are. To me, it doesn't seem that crazy that she wasn't able to get back up those stairs. And again, maybe it's not because of all the reasons we were just talking about. Maybe there was somebody in the house and she could still hear them upstairs, and perhaps she was like, I'm safer down here.
Yeah.
I'll just wait for help to come. Somebody must have heard what had happened, and we have no idea what was going through her mind, in these final moments. But yeah, maybe there was somebody in the house and she just didn't want to go back up the stairs because she thought somebody was up there. Or maybe she regained consciousness and was like confused about what had just happened. For all she knows, she could have regained consciousness and been like, was I attacked? Like, what's going on here? I'm bleeding all over. Like, this is insane.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We just have no idea what could have been going through her mind. And man, if her dog probably,
I know.
For dogs could talk, right?
Yesterday. Like, if only animals could talk, yeah. Janelle, if I were to ask you how many active subscriptions you have, would you know? Would you be able to tell me?
I wouldn't be able to tell you because I genuinely have no idea how many I have.
Which is shocking to me, as we have been sponsored by Rocket Money on all our shows for a long time.
Well, I will tell you this, okay? I didn't know how many I had until recently when I actually downloaded Rocket Money.
Oh, you did?
Yes. And
great.
Now I'm aware, and it was a little shocking, but Rocket Money took care of it for me, so no worries.
Well, that's the best part about it, is if you have subscriptions that you don't want anymore, that was the biggest thing for me, is I knew I had these subscriptions, but I didn't want to deal with customer service. I hate getting on the phone, just in general, but especially with the customer service agents that are going to try to convince me, 10 ways till Sunday, that I should keep my subscriptions active. I don't like the peer pressure of it all. I don't like dealing with it. So that's the best part for me, is Rocket Money just takes care of it with a few app taps.
I was able to get my subscriptions under control, but I like it for budgeting and expense tracking. Also with the premium plan, which this is really cool. I didn't even notice this until right now when I just looked at the app, because I pay for the premium plan, but they have an option there that says, pay us what you think is fair.
Really?
Yeah, I've never seen this before in an app. So there's a slider, and they're so confident that you will like the features that the premium plan offers, which is everything we just talked about, but also credit report monitoring, net worth tracking, and then you can chat with their agents for financial assistance around questions with the app.
But it is important to note that Rocket Money does have free options available as well. Some services, some of their features are completely free to use. So it's definitely a great thing to get started with, kind of experiment, see how much you need. And yeah, we really can't recommend it enough. I love Rocket Money. It's helped us in so many ways. It's a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, but also monitors your spending and helps you lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. You can see all of your subscriptions in one place, know exactly where your money is going. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. So stop wasting money on things you don't use and cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/milehigher. That's rocketmoney.com/milehigher. Once again, rocketmoney.com/milehigher. So if there was an assailant, it would have explained some of the inconsistencies. For one, it would explain why Ruby was barking so much while Amanda was on the phone with Lee, and the yelp could have been the person striking the dog, possibly. Then the chair and the phone would have been knocked over during a struggle. Of course, that's a theory as well. But again, this entire theory would depend on that back door being unlocked, unless it was someone with a key, someone that she knew, or maybe someone that she even let in because she knew who they were.
True. If we're talking about the assailant theory, there's a lot of things to think about because, again, the police scrubbed this house. They looked for any signs of somebody else being present at the time that this all happened, and there is nothing.
Nothing. No DNA, no footprints, no fingerprints, nothing.
So if it was somebody that she knew, what is the likelihood that this person came in and was like completely, I mean, I'm going back to the only possibility is like somebody comes in wearing a wetsuit, completely gloved up, so absolutely no DNA gets dropped anywhere. But even then, there's usually some sign that there was at least another person in, possibly, you know what I mean? And if there was a struggle, like I really am struggling with there was a struggle going on. You know what I mean? Because the only things that we have to indicate that are the phone being smashed on the ground,
which
and the chair being
be
tipped
explained
over.
in other ways.
Right. Small home. There's a black lab running around. She could have stepped on his paw. Dogs knock over stuff all the time. So there's that. But how did this person? So like, what was their intentions when they came in? And like the first thing that comes to my mind when talking about this is perhaps somebody came in. Their intention was to possibly sexually assault her, and maybe he grabs her or something, and again, there's no defensive wounds, and there's usually defensive wounds in this type of attack. But this person then shoves her down the stairs to get her into the basement where they're going to proceed with their attack. And she hits the piggy bank. She goes down the bottom. She starts bleeding everywhere. The person is like, oh, I got to get out of here because obviously I'm going to be discovered if I go down there and continue, right?
Right.
And so then they just leave, and maybe the door was left unlocked. I think it all goes back to the door, right? Was the door unlocked when Lee got there, or was it locked? Because I think that would tell us a lot here. Because if it's locked, does the assailant theory, does that just completely go away? There's no signs of forced entry.
We just don't know if it was locked.
How they get in then? I that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
And then this whole idea that the bloodstain analyst was saying, well, maybe somebody was down there in the blood and was like wiping up their footprints and stuff. I'm just like, how make that make sense? Like, how does that make any sense whatsoever?
And then I had the thought of, could it have been someone that came to the front door saying that they're in an emergency, they need help, or they want to, I don't know, sell something. She lets them in. But then it's like, I go back to the phone call, and Lee would have heard something like that happening, because clearly whatever happened on the phone is around the time that this all occurred.
Right.
So that doesn't really make sense.
So this
either.
assailant didn't say anything and just walked in. And again, could be. I'm not saying it's not impossible, but I think when looking at probability and also evidence, I don't see that much evidence for an assailant.
Yeah.
Unless, again, the back door was unlocked.
Yeah. Yeah, the more I said in the beginning that I 75% lean towards accident, but the more and more we discuss this, I'm leaning more that way. But the lead investigator does admit that the accident theory doesn't fully explain everything, and the case isn't closed, but it's inactive until they receive additional information, which who knows if they will ever receive that information, because it has been 8 years since this happened, and her death was ultimately ruled as undetermined. She was buried near her father in her hometown of Carstairs, and Lee says that if he could change the past, he would have stayed home and prevented Amanda from being left in the basement. He said, quote, "It changes a person, especially losing the love of your life." He still believes that there's something more to this case, like the rest of her family does as well. Her brother Daryl says that he thinks of Amanda daily and that she's telling him someone did this to her and to not stop until they find out what really happened. And if I were in their shoes, there's no way I could just accept the accident theory and move on when there's all these weird inconsistencies and just the possibility that it could have really been something else. It's just so hard to imagine, right? Thinking about the stairs, we all go down the stairs so often, and in the United States, there are about 12,000 deaths per year due to stairway accidents and over 1 million injuries. But one thing you have to consider is many of those are older people over the age of 65 or young children, like under the age of 3. So that makes the likelihood of this even smaller, as small as it already is. It's just so
disagree.
hard to believe.
I disagree.
I'm not saying that's how I feel. It's hard to wrap your mind around, especially something like we all go down the stairs so often. And it's really scary to think that something like this could happen.
It's the second leading cause of accidental injury, though. after motor vehicles, which I found shocking.
I mean, I can see for injury, though. That makes sense. People do fall down the stairs, and it's easy to get an injury, but to die and to have that much blood, such a severe injury from a staircase fall, that's just really hard for me to wrap my mind around. Like, everything in me tells me that's not possible, but I know that it is, and I'm not an expert. So, yeah, I lean more towards accident theory as well.
Well, I looked up the statistic, and it's like there's a 0.4% chance of dying from falling down the stairs. I think it's like the statistic, like 0.04. Sorry,
yes.
0.04.
0.004, actually.
0.004?
Yeah.
Okay, so
I believe so, from what I saw.
And I bet you there is data and experts out there who would back up this claim. I think the probability of seriously injuring yourself or potentially dying on their stairwell is significantly higher than the average person.
Because it isn't up to code.
Because of that ledge that doesn't have a railing. And not only that, but having objects within your stairwell that you could potentially injure yourself on.
Mm-hmm.
I think raises the probability for this to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think their experts who study this would probably back that claim up.
Mm-hmm.
And be based on the data and based on what we're seeing there. And the thing that I really struggle with, and maybe this is just because it's unsolved mysteries and they want to leave everything as like open as possible, but how come we never heard like the investigators, the actual detectives that worked this case, present their theory? You know what I mean? Like the assailant theory. What's their assailant theory? And like part of me is like, did they do that because the show wants to leave it open to all these possibilities, or like what do they actually think? What is their, what does that detective think?
No, they just may not be in a place to even make a statement.
True,
like that,
true. But like what do they think it's possible based on the evidence that an assailant could have been in there? I would love to know. I'd love to know more of their thoughts on that because, again, I don't think it's impossible. I think based on the things that we've discussed, I think it's more likely this was a horrible accident because I feel unless, again, maybe that door was unlocked and maybe somebody snuck in, pushed her.
And left no trace, no DNA. It's just, that's hard to believe. And then, of course, people bring up the idea that if obviously Lee didn't do it, he has an alibi. He was at his mom's house. We know that, unless mother was lying, but I think they've checked it out further than that. They've confirmed.
Yeah, they found convenience store footage from Lee's drive up,
Yeah.
so they know for a fact he was not there.
He couldn't have been there. So the other option is murder for hire, but we know that he's struggling financially. Even if he did, which I have covered some cases where they pay people shockingly low amounts of money to commit a murder, but like, you get what you pay for. You're not going to be able to hire like a professional hitman with a low budget.
Those guys get caught.
Yeah. And if this was a professional, that could explain why the evidence, why it was such a clean job. But yeah, it doesn't add up for him to be able to pay for that. And then, if it was someone he paid on the low, it would have been much more of a mess. There's no way they would have not left anything. And there's no signs of her fighting back. It's just so odd. And I want to go back to the stair case, the Michael Peterson, Kathleen Peterson case, because I am, in my opinion, Michael is guilty. I do not believe Kathleen died due to the staircase fall. Can you look up the name of the other woman that he was strangely there for her death, also down a staircase? I think that's the biggest thing for me with that case is how does that happen twice? The chances of fall down a staircase killing you is already so small. How does this happen twice? Of course, it could. Strange things do happen. Bizarre. Yeah.
Well, he was at the house too.
Yeah, right.
Versus in this case, nobody was at the house.
And there weren't any other elements of like a piggy bank or some other object that could have been involved. It was like purely the staircase, unless you get into the owl theory and, there's all that. But this is a very different situation.
It is. Yeah, I don't think it has as many similarities Michael Kathleen Peterson case is very different circumstances.
And there's obviously tons of other elements.
And again, I think we're all just like completely baffled by just somebody
dying, falling down the stairs.
Because it's like we've all tripped and, taken a fall down the stairs at least once in our life, right?
Yeah. And it's like, it does make sense when it's an older person with weaker bones and for them to break things and pass that way. But it's like in these cases where there's like extreme amounts of blood, it's really hard to wrap your mind around.
By the way, okay, 2 things. Her name was, I believe, Elizabeth Ratliff.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because that happened in Germany, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was in 1985. She was 43 years old. And then also your percentage of the 0.004. I think they're getting that from, like, what is the percentage of 12,000 out of 330 million, which is the U.S. population, and that's like 0.0036, aka 0.004.
So tiny chance. But yeah, maybe it was just the perfect storm. With the
I just can't
build
believe
of the stairs, the piggy bank. It's just crazy.
How come they didn't mention the legend having no railing?
I know. I'm really shocked that that's not brought up more.
And like, I struggle with unsolved mysteries sometimes because I think
they leave out a lot.
They leave out a lot because they want to create the mystery, right? But I think, and usually when we do cover these unsolved mystery cases, there's always a lot more that isn't mentioned, whether it be background information on the victim,
I feel like
or
almost
suspect.
Every case we've covered from an unsolved mystery case, we end up finding so much more.
They just like glaze over it and just kind of give you like the quick rundown of it, but they don't really like to. And they'll leave. I give them kudos because they did at least show a lot of what the investigators were looking at. Because I found somebody on Reddit who actually like went through frame by frame of that episode in order to zoom in on all the pictures and look at the reports that they were showing, and they pulled stuff from it that would have been great to mention. It would have been more complete coverage of the actual case, but like it doesn't seem like they're always interested in giving the most complete coverage. They're there to create this kind of mysterious episode.
Well, it's like they keep it to a certain length. It's not a podcast where we can just go on as long as we want. But I don't hate Unsolved Mysteries. I actually think it's one of the better true crime shows out there. I think they do a pretty good job of really highlighting the victim's life and who they were, and they really involve family members. And
I agree, but I do think sometimes they push it a little bit to try to like
they do play it up quite
create
a bit.
Let the theories run wild. You know what I mean? When sometimes there's a very
compared to what else is out there.
No,
it is so much less salacious that I'm a fan of Unsolved Mysteries.
No, I'm not saying I'm not a fan. I just think I think sometimes
critique is valid. I agree.
Yeah, sometimes
I agree.
It's like you got to just look at the facts. You got to look at the evidence, and the evidence sometimes points to something that doesn't always sit right with people, and we don't know everything, so we can't definitively say that based on the evidence that we have that this is what happened. But I feel like it should have at least been mentioned. They even showed the picture of the stairwell, and nobody mentions.
No, I completely agree.
Wait a minute,
that's a big miss.
This isn't up to code because that is a major injury risk. Why is there no railing there?
Yeah.
And where's that ledge in relation to the piggy bank? You know what I mean? So I don't know. Maybe I'm just like diving in too deep on it, but that's.
No, I don't think so.
I just am like
valid to bring up.
I'm trying to connect the dots, and the dots are connecting for me based on what I've seen of the actual crime scene photos, and to me, it adds up for me. And I'm not saying I'm not completely I'm not completely opposed to an assailant being involved, but I think
there's not enough evidence for it as of now. But there's always that chance there's something that's missed. There's something we don't know.
You never know. I don't put anything past anything at this point in time because crazier things have happened. So,
and I fully respect this family's, thought process here. And I would be the same way. If there's even that like 1% of doubt, I would follow that through till the end, till I had the answers 100%, Oh, I just feel so badly for all of them. It's horrific. And for Amanda, thinking about what the end of her life is like, it's just beyond tragic, no matter how it happened. Such a just
it's horrible.
Horrific injury and scary scene. And I can't imagine what was going through her mind, especially if she was confused and disoriented. It's horrible. So if you have any information about the death of Amanda Antoni, you can submit a tip to calgarycrimestoppers.org. And I am certainly very, very curious to hear from our audience what you all think. I am assuming there's going to be people kind of all over the board here. I wonder where the majority of you are going to land. I have a feeling it's going to be more towards freak accident. But yeah, let us know if there's any other things that you thought of that maybe we didn't consider.
Definitely. I'll be waiting and watching and reading.
Are we all kind of under the same agreement that it's most likely a freak accident, in our opinion?
I am.
Yeah, I think, you and I were talking beforehand, and I think just, again, evidence doesn't lead up to an assailant, especially one who is just so good that they leave no trace. But also, like, again, this is why I'm torn, is just that the probability of this working, like, because again, she died from blood loss, not brain trauma or anything. So just the fact that all of it added up together, the painkillers, the injury itself leading to insane blood loss, like that is just as low of a probability as someone killing her and accidentally like leaving no trace.
Right.
But there's not enough evidence to point to someone ever being in the house aside from her. So I have to go accident, even though I'm hung up on some shit for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely not 100% on that. Yeah, I definitely recommend watching the Unsolved Mysteries episode. I know we just said that they were missing some things, but they do have some like a 911 call that we can't play due to copyright reasons, and just interviews with their family members. So yeah, give it a watch, and maybe that'll, I don't know, give you more to think about. But yeah, thanks for tuning in today, guys. We will be back next week to discuss another case. We have a very interesting one coming next week as well. But that is it for us today. And keep on taking your mind a mile higher.